Hello, this is Iper Swords, and this is a longsword by Lutel Handicraft. Lutel is a company that comes out of the Czech Republic, and at one point it branched off to Lutel proper and Lutel Handicraft. Lutel, single word, has had quite a few complaints since that point of rather scummy business practices and poor quality swords. Lutel Handicraft has been producing these higher quality swords with very good customer service and quality control. I recommend going to Lutel Handicraft's website if you'd like one of these and not giving your business to Lutel single word. That disclaimer out of the way, let's have a look at this. This is actually the first functional sword I ever bought. Although I did have some other weapons at the time, none of them were on this scale of magnitude. It's a slightly customized version of their 15021 model. This has a few changes to the way the grip is made and also to the blade. We'll take a look at that in detail. First, let's have a cursory overview of what this is. This is a full-size longsword, not a hand and a half or bastard sword. Although it is within the weight range you could use it one-handed, I really don't recommend it. It really brings its own when you use it in two hands. The fittings are all of mild steel, and thus they do rust, so you'll have to excuse the rust here on the pommel, as I do cut with this fairly often. The handle is wrapped with a thin spiral of leather in a chestnut red colour, and at my request they did a half-wire wrap. The wire wrap is very tight and shows no sign of loosening over the entire time I've had this. Additionally, this has a screw-on pommel. However, for the life of me I cannot get it to unscrew, and it has never come loose in the years I've been using it. I'll have to surmise that this is just as secure as a peentang because there is no way this thing is coming apart. The guard has a so-called S-shape. I've talked to many people who don't like S-shaped guards, however I'm quite fond of them, and that's why I had this made with one. The handle is very comfortable. You can see that it features a swelled section here, and is thinner here near the guard. This oval section, with its non-linear section, makes it very comfortable to use and makes it extremely easy to align the edge. However, having said that, I still prefer to finger the guard across here, simply because that's my preferred way of cutting with a longsword. I know that someone is going to say, so why don't you get a sword with fingerings? My answer to that is, I'm saving up. One downside to Lutel Handicraft is the fact that they do not make wood core scabbards. While this is a fairly nice scabbard, or rather sheath, it is simply a leather, flexible scabbard. It does have a nice shape to it, and it has some decorative rivets with some leather cutouts. I do have to note that the finish on this blade is not what you'd expect with a brand new product, as I've sharpened and finished this blade several times in order to make it functional over many cutting sessions on even heavy targets like wood. This was done in the interest of making sure this was a durable sword. It was also my first sword, so my cuts were not perfect when I first bought it, although I have obviously improved significantly over time, as practice makes perfect. You can see the Lutel maker's mark here. It is a hot stamped dagger on the blade. This blade features a single fuller and has a squared off ricasso. Not all of their swords have a ricasso made like this. I specifically requested it because I like to have a finger looped over the guard, and this allows me to do so without any risk of cutting my fingers. The fuller has one issue, which I did not think of when I first bought it, and that's the fact that the fuller does not run under the guard. Many antiques will have a fuller running under the guard, although some are made with this construction. So I'll have to forgive them for that. The fit up of the blade into the guard is extremely close, with no gaps. This is one of the other benefits of making it with a squared off ricasso. I'm being rather careful handling this sword as it is practically razor sharp, or rather it is paper cutting sharp. The blade is around 5mm thick here at the base. This is a little bit thinner than I would personally like. Many of the antiques are around 5.5 to 7.5mm thick, with some going all the way up to around 9mm. and tapering aggressively in the first portion, before tapering more linearly across the rest of the blade. Having said that, the handling of this sword is very pleasant, and it is still decently stiff. It balances around 3.5 inches away from the guard, which is well within the historical ranges, and the overall weight is 1550 grams. This is quite a competent cutting sword. I'll be posting videos of that later this week, along with several other swords in one long cutting session. I also have a lot of practice cutting with this sword, so it probably has a bit of an unfair advantage compared to my one-handed swords, which I've only been using for the past 3 years, as opposed to 6 years with this. And that brings me to another point. If you bought a Lutel today, it might be made to slightly different standards due to feedback they've received over the last 6 or so years. This blade has a flattened diamond cross-section, which you can see here. While the lines are slightly blended due to the satin polish I've put on this after sharpening it many times, it is decently stiff due to this flattened diamond cross-section. However, this is a late 15th century sword, so you'd expect it to be even stiffer than it is in order to be able to get into the niches of armor or break through chainmail rings on the thrust. I actually had this blade made pointier and slimmer, at least in terms of profile taper, than the standard 15021 sword that Lutel produces, which has a more spatulate tip and less aggressive profile taper. The distal taper across the swords at the time was all the same. However, I have heard reports that they are slightly thicker at the base now than they were before. All of the fit up and finishing on this sword is actually very well done, on par perhaps with people like Valiant Armory. It is also of a fairly decent price. I've linked it in the description so you can have a look yourself, and I will note that my customization options did not cost me any more. Overall, I'd actually have to recommend Lutel, at least for sharps. I've heard some complaints in terms to their softness and weight when you buy a blunt. However, this sharp sword has been very pleasant to use and falls well within the historical weight range. While I do wish the blade was thicker at the tang and it had a non-linear taper, this is a fairly minor complaint due to the fact it does not significantly affect handling. Its largest effect would be in a small amount of harmonics and, in a large amount, the durability of this sword. However, as I have said, I've trained with this sword extensively, and it has always performed very well. This has been a quick 6-year late first impression video looking at a Lutel Customised longsword. If you've enjoyed this video, please watch for my next video in which I'll be cutting with this sword and others. This has been iPo Swords. Until next time, stay sharp.